Check. 1, 2. What's good? It's Wood. Boy, there's a lot to unpack heading into this one. We've got Tszyu, 24 wins and 0 losses, taking on Sebastian Fundora on very short notice. Fundora was supposed to fight Sergey Bohachuk, and Tszyu was supposed to fight Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman pulled out due to bicep injury, and then in a scramble, PBC pretty much saves the day on this fight card by kind of reconfiguring the fighters and making it work out, where we have some very compelling matchups. And the headliner is this one, Tszyu, who's going to be defending his WBO 154-pound title again against Sebastian Fundora. And the vacant WBC 154-pound title is also up for grabs. So this is actually a title unification fight. And the odd part about this is Sergey Bohachuk, who again was going to fight Sebastian Fundora for the vacant WBC 154-pound title, is now going to be fighting Brian Mendoza. And now that fight is going to be for the interim WBC 154-pound title. So it's just weird that you have the actual title up for grab, and then you've got the interim title up for grab on the same fight card. The interim is supposed to indicate that something happened to the champ, or that the main championship is for some reason like being held up, or it's not able to be contested. This is literally taking place on the same fight card, so that part's weird. But Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora, I like the matchup. I feel terrible for Keith Thurman. Look, Keith Thurman has had multiple spells of multiple year spans of inactivity. I think now he's had like 3 multiple year spans of inactivity. And this was, this fight was just around the corner, and Keith Thurman had to pull out due to injury. I know that there were a lot of conspiracy theorists who say, this was a part of the plan the whole time. I'm personally not buying it. I feel for Keith. I think he actually wanted to compete. The question is, as it pertains to Keith Thurman, is he going to be able to recover, get back into camp, and ever get his career back on track? Like, I don't think we have seen prime Keith Thurman since he fought Danny Garcia way back in like 2017. That's how long ago Keith Thurman was last in his prime, before injury started plaguing him, before life, his life and lifestyle started taking him away from the sport. And I mean like family life, just kind of being into other things. Not that there was anything bad lifestyle wise. It wasn't anything like that. It's just, he pretty much just grew up and grew out of love with the sport. That's how it seemed to me. But I really have doubts, depending on the severity of his bicep injury, whether he'll be able to, one, secure another fight, because that's been a big problem. Like, the fights that he's wanted haven't been afforded to him. Either he wants more than the market bears for his fights, or there are fights maybe that are offered to him that he's not interested in. Like, he's in that final stage where he wants to make his fight decisions count, which was a little bit interesting. Given that Tszyu versus Keith Thurman was not going to be for Tszyu's title, it was technically at a catch weight. So I was wondering why Keith Thurman agreed to fighting Tszyu. Keith Thurman, one of the most inactive fighters, versus Tszyu, literally one of the most active elite fighters. He fought like 3 times against quality opponents in 2023. I just thought that all the signs were bad in that one, and it was just puzzling. I was surprised that Keith Thurman, before they announced Tszyu versus Keith Thurman, it was looking like, for a moment, it was rumored that Keith Thurman was going to be fighting Iammontas Stanionis, and even that was puzzling. I thought that Keith Thurman would be the type to angle for like a Conor Benn fight, or somebody who's a big name, lesser threat. Just relatively speaking, I thought that he was going to go for something like that. Or, of course, if he was going to have the opportunity to fight Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford, I think Keith Thurman would have done that. I didn't think he was going to fight Boots. I didn't think he was interested in fighting like Virgil Ortiz or anybody like that. I didn't think he would have been interested in fighting Stanionis, and I wouldn't have imagined that he would have been interested in fighting Tszyu. But yeah, that fight was made, that fight was canceled, and now we've got Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora. And you want to talk about a stylistic difference, like just the fact that Tszyu was so matter-of-factly okay with this change of plans, and kind of like, all right, I'll fight him, going from fighting a 5'8" Keith Thurman to a 6'6" southpaw Sebastian Fundora. and your title's now on the line versus, you know, kind of this being a catchweight fight against Keith Thurman. This is a very serious fight against Sebastian Fundora. And you want to know how much could change like in a year, year and a half? If this exact fight was made like a year and a half ago, Sebastian Fundora would have undoubtedly been the betting favorite. And that's because Tszyu would have been, his last fight would have been against Terrell Gausha. That was his PBC debut. Didn't look great against Gausha, got dropped early, pretty much won the majority of the rounds after that. And he beat Gausha via decision. And that was like his first fight out of Australia. Before that, he was beating like Jeff Horn, Dennis Hogan, and others, looking very good. But again, these were like reduced former either champions or title contender type fighters. And Tszyu was really putting a beating on him. He was looking really good. And the question was that going to be able to scale up as he scaled up in competition? So there were a lot of questions on whether Tszyu was more in terms of, you know, great Hall of Fame fighters' sons. Was he going to be more Layla Ali or Chris Eubank Jr.? I didn't want to say the obvious Floyd Mayweather Jr., but was he going to be Julio Cesar Chavez, at least during the good part of Chavez Jr.'s career? Or was he going to be more what Campbell Hatton appears to be? Not to pick on Campbell Hatton, but was he going to be a son of a legend who could kind of live up to or at least look like an elite fighter? Or was it going to be somebody who was going to get some hotness off the name alone and wouldn't really deliver as much in the ring? By the way, Emiliano Vargas, Fernando Vargas' son, keep your eye on that guy. I've been watching him. He's looking pretty fierce, or should I say ferocious, right? But there was still a lot of question as to how good Tszyu was or wasn't. And outside of Jermell Charlo, who at the time was the undisputed champion, you could argue that Sebastian Fundora was probably the next best in the division. He was ascending. He was beating guys like Sergio Garcia. He stopped Erickson Lubin, knocked out Jorge Cota. He was just looking like an absolute handful at, again, 6'6" at 154, the towering inferno. He was looking like he was near the top. Like he was probably the next guy that people would have wanted to see Jermell Charlo fight before Tszyu just went crazy in 2023 and stopped Tony Harrison, knocked out Carlos Ocampo in the first round, and then later in the year beat Brian Mendoza. Because remember, Jermell Charlo versus Tszyu was scheduled. Jermell Charlo pulled out of the fight due to injury, ended up, you know, taking a while to recover. When he did recover, he ended up fighting, if you want to call it that, Canelo Alvarez. Meanwhile, instead of waiting, Tszyu got busy. He got right to work, took on the next guy, then the next guy, and again, quality opponents. Meanwhile, Sebastian Fundora in his latest fight was doing pretty well against Brian Mendoza before getting knocked out badly in the 7th round against Mendoza. And that was the fight that actually got Brian Mendoza the title shot against Tszyu. So Tszyu went like this in 2023. Sebastian Fundora's reputation went like this in 2023. So 1 year to a year and a half can make a world of difference. Because now, if you look at the betting odds, I saw Sebastian Fundora going off at like a minus 430. So a greater than 4-1 favorite, whereas Fundora is like a plus 400, a 4-1 underdog. Again, a year to a year and a half ago, Fundora would have been the favorite in that one. Even if people had questions as to how much longer could he fight at 154, when is this, you know, length and height and weird, awkward build, given his, you know, up close phone booth fight style, when is all this going to catch up with him? Well, it caught up with him against Brian Mendoza. And, you know, after that knockout, I was almost sure that Fundora was going to return like at 160. I wouldn't have thought that he would have taken several months off and then come back and return to 154. Like, how the hell is this guy still making 154? Of course, assuming that he makes weight for this title opportunity against Tszyu. Again, 2 titles are on the line: Tszyu's WBO title and the vacant WBC title. So Jermell Charlo no longer holds any of the 4 belts. The IBF title, I believe, is going to be up for grabs between, Murtazaliev. I think that was Jermell Charlo's mandatory. So now Murtazaliev is going to be fighting Jack Kulke for the vacant IBF title. And then the WBA title was just won by Madrimov against Kurbanov on that AJ versus Francis Ngannou undercard. But let's take a look at this one. Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora. Again, look, I think that this is a better, more appropriate fight than Tim Tszyu versus Keith Thurman, right? Keith Thurman, unless he totally pulled a rabbit out of his hat, had a performance of a lifetime. Well, that's not. Keith Thurman has been elite, A level in the past, but in the mid 30s with all the inactivity, again, there were just so many indicators and red flags that made this not look good for Keith Thurman. And again, I question whether he's ever going to make it back now that he's, going to be in his mid 30s to pushing the other side of 35, most likely before he's ready to return to the ring. But Tim Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora, this is intriguing. And, if this fight was announced a year ago, I would have been very, very interested. But given, what we've seen from these guys in recent fights, I mean, you want to talk about a difficult fight to come back to for Fundora. Like, I thought that it was tough enough that he was going to be going against Bohachuk. I'm like, okay, Bohachuk's, he's kind of a real one. Yes, he did lose to Brandon Adams, but aside from that, he's been, beating people up. And Fundora got knocked out where I thought he was going to take a light touch or two before he fights an elite guy, right? I thought he was going to fight somebody towards the bottom of the top 10 or maybe somewhere 11 through 15, somewhere in there, just to get back on track, build some confidence. But he's going to be fighting Tim Tszyu. So that's something to factor. Is he mentally, psychologically ready to really mix it up again? And I mean, how recovered is his chin? Is this a case where now anytime he gets really, really touched on that button, he could go out like Amir Khan? These are some things that I'm considering, but style-wise, Fundora, I know he's got the reputation of being a phone booth style fighter at 6'6", but if you look at that fight against Brian Mendoza, he was actually boxing a lot from the outside. I think that it's because Fundora was playing the hunter a little bit in that one, and Mendoza's a mover. He moves laterally, right? He likes to box. He's pretty elusive. He's a kind of a sweet science guy, and he likes to box at range. I think that Mendoza might have learned from Erickson Lubin's mistake. Erickson Lubin kind of took on the attitude that, hey, if I get inside on this long arm guy, I could really do some work to the body. I could beat him up over time, break him down, and take him out. That's how Lubin was fighting. Well, joke's on you, because that's exactly what Sebastian Fundora wants you to do. And by the time Erickson Lubin had discovered that, it was way too late, and he was in a dogfight by that time, and he got beaten and bruised up to where his face was looking disfigured, and they stopped the fight because of the state of his face. It was really, really nasty. He looked like he got stung by a swarm of bees. So I think that Mendoza saw that and then said, wait a second, maybe the way to fight this guy is counter to what you would think you would want to do against somebody who's 6'6" with a crazy reach. Box him from the outside. But that's exactly what Brian Mendoza did. And yes, he was losing just about every round before the knockout, but you saw what he was trying to do early. Like, he would move and move laterally, and then he would kind of put his head down and he would throw kind of a haymaker right hand, and he would barely miss him. But you could see what he was trying to set up at range. And Fundora in that fight, again, he was so jab heavy, especially through the first few rounds. Usually by round 3, Fundora is fighting an inside fight, and he's letting those short hooks and uppercuts go. That's where he really thrives. So it was a little bit interesting to see him throw so many jabs at range. I'm assuming that Tim Tszyu isn't going to be the Brian Mendoza-like lateral mover. Even if you're supposed to abandon conventional wisdom when fighting a guy like Fundora, given his style. I don't think that Tim Tszyu is going to switch up his style and all of a sudden really become a back foot guy. Even though, again, the last person to really try to take it to Fundora was Lubin. Carlos Ocampo tried to box a little bit more from the outside. I guess you could say Sergio Garcia was another guy who kind of mixed it up and, lived to tell about it. He survived, and he went the full 12 rounds. Unanimous decision win for Fundora, but a competitive one. I don't expect Tim Tszyu to be moving and trying to keep things at super long range with Fundora. I mean, maybe he stays outside and looks for a bomb occasionally, but I more or less expect him to do his patient hunting style, where you put mental pressure without throwing a ton of punches. Like, you take a step forward, you kind of feint, change levels. You always look like you're in position to throw something, even if you're not always throwing something. And you see how effective it is. That's why I desperately wanted to see what a Jermell Charlo versus Tim Tszyu fight would look like. It's just a shame. I mean, we might still get it in the future, but the fact that we didn't get that in 2023, it's like, damn. And then we got what we got between Jermell Charlo and Canelo Alvarez, but I digress. I think that Tim Tszyu is going to still fight his style. He's going to have some work to do though, because, you know, is he going to keep a high guard as he's walking forward? Is he going to try to dare Sebastian Fundora to start letting that left hand go so that Tim Tszyu could throw his right hand over or even under that? I think Tim Tszyu is going to methodically start going to the body. I think he's going to avoid the all-out brawl where both guys are kind of forced to throw 60 to 80 punches just to try, you know, just to keep up on this treadmill with Sebastian Fundora. Lucky for Tim Tszyu, I think he's got the type of punching power where he doesn't need to continue to break Fundora down. Like maybe he will if he has trouble finding the chin, but I think that Tim Tszyu is he's gonna be jabbing to the chest area, hit something, right? Touch something. And Tim Tszyu, even more so than Erickson Lubin, is good at setting up his big shots. He's good at feinting you out of position, kind of getting you to react, and then at a certain time, letting a couple mean punches go, maybe one up top and one to the body. He's really good at making every punch count. I think it was when he fought Tony Harrison, I looked at him and I'm like, yo, this guy's he's a little Canelo-like. I think I even said that in the post-fight. He's got some Canelo-like activity where, again, he's not high volume, but it's a mental pressure and it's a patient hunting style where you are economical in not only your punch output, but even your movement. You're not wasting anything and you're making everything count. Tim Tszyu, I think, is going to be able to do that. I think he's going to be giving up a few rounds potentially, but I can also see Tim Tszyu start to break Fundora down between the body and the chin. And again, there's just not that much margin for error when it comes to having clean shots landed on you from Tim Tszyu. And if you're still coming back from a knockout loss, Tim Tszyu's the wrong guy to have testing your chin. I just don't see that working out over time. Fundora's chance in this one is if he's able to make this fight devolve into a true phone booth style fight where he could kind of drown out Tim Tszyu. I think he might overwhelm Tszyu in moments. I think he might out-volume him, back him up, kind of get Tim Tszyu like looking like he's in a whirlwind, like, damn, what the hell is going on in moments, but not over time. When Tim Tszyu has the opportunity to walk back to the corner, think about it a little bit, reassess, and then make an adjustment coming into the next round. I mean, I know that a lot of guys would want to change strategy a few rounds into a fight against Fundora once they realize, damn, what have I gotten myself into, like Erickson Lubin? But sometimes you're watching the fight and it just looks like the guy's got no room to breathe and no real opportunity to make those adjustments because you're in this whirlwind of activity. You sometimes look like you're surrounded by the guy, right? Tim Tszyu, I think that he's such a high IQ style fighter. I think he's going to find ways of setting up big shots where Fundora would be foolish to just start opening up with, you know, those 6-punch combinations, even if that is the style that he's lived and died once, you know, I mean, metaphorically. But if that's a style that's gotten him to this point, I know that that's what he's going to be tempted to do. I wonder if he's getting different instructions like, hey, maybe don't throw so many punches, but is a Sebastian Fundora who's less volume, is that a better Sebastian Fundora? Is that a more effective Sebastian Fundora? I mean, is this going to be a Sebastian Fundora who throws fewer punches but sits on more of his punches and puts more power into those punches? I mean, maybe, but I don't foresee that being the strategy. If we see Sebastian Fundora looking like he's, you know, moving like Tommy Hearns in the early rounds against Sugar Ray Leonard, I mean, maybe we get that version of Sebastian Fundora, but I would be surprised. And if we get that Fundora, I still don't think that that's going to win him the fight against Tim Tszyu. You know, I guess what I'm trying to say is I really don't think it matters what Sebastian Fundora does, whether he fights like Fundora or doesn't fight like Fundora. Maybe not fighting like Fundora gives him a slightly better chance. Like if he could just keep it at range and make Tim Tszyu react to feints, jab, jab, move. If he could totally redefine his style. I mean, Paul Williams never did, right? Paul Williams was a little Fundora-like in the way that he gave up his height and he paid for it against who did he pay for? Sergio Martinez. And then later it should have been Erislandy Lara, but that was a bit of a robbery. Different discussion for a different day. But yeah, absent of Fundora totally retooling his whole style and giving Tszyu a totally back foot, move around type of look, anything other than that, I think is going to result in not only a Tszyu win, but I think Tszyu's going to stop Sebastian Fundora. And I know that sounds tough. If Sebastian Fundora, given the rise that he was on, suffers back-to-back stoppage losses, that would not be good. But I kind of think that that's where we will be after this Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora fight. I think Tszyu's going to stop him. I think he's going to catch him, start to wobble him, drop him a couple times. I think this is going to look pretty dramatic, just given how tall Sebastian Fundora is. I think we're going to see that. I think Tszyu, is it going to be earlier or later? See, I mean, that's such a wild card because I don't know how well and ready Sebastian Fundora is mentally, even when it comes to the chin physically, but psychologically, all of that. This is such an unusual return to the ring for a guy who just experienced a knockout. You know what I mean? Like, is this ill-advised matchmaking? Like, should Fundora have turned this down? I wonder. I mean, I know they were in a scramble. I know PBC was probably hustling to put this thing together, and they did. And I'm satisfied with the result. This is a very good fight card. It was never a good pay-per-view worthy card, but it's a pretty stacked card. It's got a few very good fights. So props to them. And I'm going to do another video about PBC and this new deal with Amazon. This is their inaugural. This is their first event on Amazon Prime. But yeah, I'm going to go Tszyu via stoppage here. I think I don't know if it's going to occur early or late. That depends on how ready Sebastian Fundora truly is. I suspect that I know how ready Tszyu is, and I think he's going to deliver big. His punches just splash too cleanly. He's too accurate. He's too methodical, too high IQ, too good at setting up the big punches and mentally pressuring you without emptying out the arsenal. Yes, we might have, again, moments of Fundora kind of drowning Tszyu momentarily, but I think this is ultimately going to be a Tszyu knockout of Sebastian Fundora. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this. Do you think Keith Thurman returns anytime soon? Are you giving Fundora a real chance at winning this one? I know, again, that back in the day, Fundora would have been the favorite, but just knowing what we know about these guys and seeing what we've seen from both of them throughout 2023, this is just one of those rare occasions where the change in betting odds is warranted. I think it's merited in this case. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. And with this PBC Amazon Prime event, did you see the news about, I think they're bringing Mauro Ranallo? I didn't see if they're bringing Al Bernstein. I think I saw that they were bringing Brian Custer back into the fold too. So they're basically reaching out to some of the Showtime guys. I mean, Steven Espinoza is partnering with PBC on this endeavor on Amazon Prime, right? And I mean endeavor as in venture rather than Endeavor, the parent company of a lot of companies, right? But before they announced that they were basically bringing back some of the Yo gang, and we'll see how this fleshes out, what their total broadcast team is going to look like. I was wondering, or I guess I should say I was hoping that maybe we would see the return of Jim Lampley. You know what I mean? I was kind of hoping that we could. And I was also, and am also hoping that they give Max Kellerman a call. I kind of miss him talking boxing. You know what I mean? He's just too good to be sitting on the sidelines. Now he's a free agent since ESPN let him go. Hey, PBC, holler at Max. I don't know if he's asking for too much. I mean, he's been a pretty high paid guy, I'd imagine, just given his reputation. But yeah, I would have wanted to see either Kellerman, Jim Lampley, something that just kind of harkens back to either the HBO days or, just that best boxing broadcast of that era. I was hoping, but this isn't a bad second place. I thought that the Showtime broadcast, out of, all the different teams, I thought that they were the second best. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.